Hi, everybody. Okay. So, welcome. Bienvenue dans cet atelier de Andy Van Drom. I will speak English and both in French. First of all, some tech thing, and remember you have the chat to interact, okay? And if you have any question or any comment, write in the chat, and Andy, I think, will answer to your question. And let me introduce Andy Van Drom. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this workshop to explore the accessible digital tools. Andy is a teacher of English as a second language in Cégep Limoilou, and a member of the college community of practice on inclusive pedagogy. In addition, he works with Profweb, Collecto, and co-author the report on digital tools to support inclusive pedagogical practice. And he practiced also inclusive pedagogy for many years now. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you, all of you, for taking out some time this morning. I know the weather is lovely outside, so thank you for being here with me in front of your screens. We're going to be spending the next 90 minutes or so together, and I'm really excited about that. As Catherine said, I'm first and foremost a teacher myself, so I'm not an expert researcher on UDL or inclusive pedagogy, but I'm somebody who's familiarized myself with these principles. I've been trying them out, I've been applying them in my classrooms and writing about it for Profweb. So that is the point of view that I will be taking. So I'm just going to share my screen so we can get the presentation started. There we go. I think there's about 15 of us online at the moment. So at any point, if you have any questions, any comments, this workshop is, of course, for you. So please don't feel shy to interrupt. Either use the raise hand function through the participants tab, or simply unmute yourself and ask your question or give your comment. You can also use the chat. I'll try and monitor all of those things at the same time. Since we're not a big number, I don't expect that to be a problem. So first of all, just a couple of words about Profweb before we get started. So Profweb was originally created in 2005, and its initial mission was to act as a portal website to allow teachers in the college network to easily find and familiarize themselves with techno-pedagogical resources. Our mission has evolved over the past 16 years already. So we seek to promote digital resources in college teaching, but obviously also learning. The two clearly go hand in hand. And we try to do so by sharing inspiring pedagogical practices. So if you log on to profweb.ca, for those of you who might not be familiar yet with that website, you will find a great number of articles and practice accounts shared by teachers, in which they detail and explain how they use certain strategies, certain tools in their own teaching practices. And through those stories, those articles, well, our ultimate goal is, of course, to equip you, teachers, to become more at ease, more familiar with ICT, with digital tools, and also just to know what is out there. So we're financed by the Ministère de l'Enseignement Supérieur, which means that all of our services are free of charge. So besides our website, we also offer tailor-made workshops that we can bring to your college, for example, or these days they can be online, and all of that is part of our mission. We have recently integrated another organization called Collecto, together with the Vitrine Technologie Éducation and Déclic, Moodle, but we of course continue to pursue the very same mission. All right, so let's get started. Before we start talking about these tools and what exactly we're going to do today, I would like to ask you a couple of questions. So I'm going to invite you to either scan the QR code on the screen with your device, your cell phone, your tablet, or you can open a browser tab and browse to www.wooclap.com/CRISPESH, CRISPESH. So we'll give you a few moments to do that. And so through these questions, well, of course, I'm interested in seeing your answers, but through this little setup, we'll be actually experimenting, trying out our first tool of the day. So I'm just going to open the browser, but you will still find the exact same information here on the website. I see there are 10 people who have logged on, so I'll give you just a few more seconds. And of course, this is a 90-minute workshop. I could talk about this for 5 hours. So at one point, of course, we do need to move forward. So if you haven't gotten in, that is perfectly fine. You can easily follow along and see the demonstration as other people respond. So you still see the join link up top, wooclap.com/CRISPESH. You can still join at any point. And so my first question is, in just a few words, so let's say 1 or 2 words, what does inclusive pedagogy mean to you? So as the first answers are starting to roll in, they're all the same size. You will notice that once you've entered an answer, you can also like somebody else's answer. If several people like the same answer, for example, diversity, we see right now it's getting bigger. Diversity, ouverture. So that means that several of you have given this answer. Right, so diversity, teaching to all students by giving choice, which is encompassing. Of course, that requires keeping in mind accessibility. So we see access, equal access, So we are starting to see certain orientations evolve. And so this is a great tool to poll your students, for example, at the beginning of a class, to see what their prior knowledge is about a topic, or simply to ask their opinion. And that, of course, is going to increase engagement, is going to prepare them for the teachings that follows in terms of inclusive practices. So let's move on to a couple of multiple choice questions now. And my first question for you is, do you take an interest in cooking and trying out new recipes? So you can vote, yes, I quite enjoy cooking, or no, cooking is really a chore for me. So quite a few of you enjoy cooking. 8 of you at the moment, so about 90%, but at least one person, and likely more, do not necessarily enjoy cooking, right? Why am I asking these questions? Well, I will tell you in just a few moments, but I have 2 more questions for you first. Next question. Before you try out a new recipe, do you just consult the list of ingredients, the different steps involved, and you're good to go? Do you like to see at least some photos, maybe of different steps, or at least a final result? Or do you prefer to watch a cooking show or a video tutorial online, maybe even follow along? All right, so far nobody likes watching cooking shows. That's completely fine, right? We're all diverse, but there is almost a two-way split between just reading or having some visual information. So that's something interesting to keep in mind. And one last question for you. So when you try out a new recipe, and that should be without an S, do you always follow the instructions to the letter because it's the first time you're trying it out? Or do you like to make slight changes, either because you have certain food preferences or restrictions, or maybe just because you like being creative, trying out certain spices and things like that? And again, it's 50-50. So half of you would follow the instructions to the letter, don't want to take any risks, and the other half are ready to get a little creative. All right, thank you very much for playing along and for answering these questions. And as I said, why did I ask you these specific questions? Well, they tell us something about the 3 principles of universal design for learning, about inclusive pedagogy, right? The 3 principles are engagement, so getting our students interested, representation, so how are we going to allow the students to learn, and action and expression. How are we going to make that learning happen? So of course, my first question, do you actually enjoy cooking, relates to engagement. And as in a typical classroom, and I'd say in a typical classroom, the percentage of people who answer, well, I do not necessarily enjoy this learning activity would be even higher? Well, it shows us the importance of providing means of engagement, right? Thinking about what can we do to spark the interest of our participants today, of students in our classes. Representation. So a fair number of you said they were ready to follow along with the recipe just in text form, but at least 40% of you indicated that you wanted some sort of visual information, in this case, in the form of photos. So the way in which we're going to present information and how we're going to help students represent that information to themselves is equally important, because again, there we see diversity in people's preferences. And the last one, which I think is always very telling, because in a typical classroom, what we tend to do, whether it concerns exams or assignments, is we give a set of instructions and we expect students to follow those instructions to the letter, right? If they don't follow the instructions, in many cases, they lose points. Yet half of us indicated that when we complete recipes, well, we like to improvise or to make some changes for a variety of reasons. So that is why in inclusive design, it's also important to take into consideration different means of action and expression, because again, different types of students will be attracted to and will perform more effectively with different means of expressing their learning. So today we're going to be using both of these elements. We're going to be looking at certain digital tools, and we're going to establish links with the chart that you have in front of you. So we have those three principles: engagement, representation, action, and expression, the three columns in the chart. But then you will also notice that there are three rows, right? And the top row is more teacher focused. It is more focused on what can we do to present information. The middle row is a collaboration between teacher and students. How can we make sure that this effort is sustained? How can we provide options for students to express themselves in different ways and for them to use those? And then, of course, the ultimate goal, which you see toward the bottom of the screen, is to create or form so-called expert learners who can internalize these principles and hopefully at the end of the course continue applying these principles for themselves more autonomously. So today, basically, we will be looking at a selection of tools or specific features of such tools to establish links with the Universal Design for Learning principles. And I will also be proposing an approach that's going to equip you to make choices based on your goals and your needs, but also those of your students. So of course, 90-minute workshop, lots of digital tools. I am aware that this might not be the most inclusive presentation in terms of cognitive load. There's a lot of ground we will cover. But of course, the aim here is not for you to include any and all of these tools in one and the same class or course, right? That would not be inclusive at all. So that is the second objective. We're going to try and find strategies to select these tools that best fit our teaching needs. So why the focus on digital tools? There were several other workshops in this colloquium that focused on the intersection of digital technology and inclusive pedagogy. So why is that? Well, these are, of course, just the reasons I see and the ones that I wish to focus on. But the main reason for me is to provide better access to knowledge, to learning. And that access, of course, relates to variability, to diversity, and considering all of these choices is going to increase the access that we allow our students to have to the skills and knowledge that we cover in our course. So we need to take that diversity into account. Something else that I believe greatly contributes to inclusion is the frequency and the quality of feedback, right? Because that is what allows us to personalize our teaching, to tailor comments, feedback to each and every student. So there will be a separate section of today's workshop on tools that allow us to give feedback in diverse ways. And then ultimately, as I said before, we want to support students' autonomy, develop their potential. And one way they can do that is through collaboration with their peers. So that's another section in today's workshop. So first of all, I'll focus on tools for presentation of content. Second will be giving feedback. And third will be collaborating. Now, this may be a little ambitious. And again, as I said, I want this workshop to be of interest and of use to you. So depending on your comments, your questions, we can slow down, we can focus on certain things and skip over others more quickly. So in each section, I will present a few tools, and then I will set up breakout rooms where you will be able to work with a blank version of this chart. I will share it with you electronically, so don't worry, you don't need anything printed. And the idea will be for you to discuss in small groups how you feel that some of the tools that will have been presented, how they can help you achieve certain of these goals that correspond to the UDL guidelines. So without further ado, content presentation. If we start with the basics, then of course, we all use Word or a different tool such as Google Docs, PowerPoint, or related slideshow tools to present content. And so to start with the basics, I just want to draw your attention to a couple of options here that relate to accessibility, right? So even if we don't use any other, let's say, more fancy tools, then there are definitely a couple of things we can do in Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. So the first one is I've just copied some text here from the report that I will share with you at the very end of this presentation. So I have text, I have an image, and this could be a page that I typically distribute to my students. What can I do to make sure that it is accessible to all of them? Well, I can click Info, Inspect Document, and choose Check Accessibility. And then you will see that a new pane opens here on the right and tells me that the image that I've inserted doesn't have any alternative text. Now, what does that mean? It means that if somebody's using a screen reader, and we'll get to that in just a moment, for example, because they're visually impaired, but also maybe because they're on the bus or on the metro and they're listening to this document instead of reading it, well, they would not have any information about that image. And so a first good reflex to have is always to double check that our document is as accessible as possible. A second feature that is available in Microsoft Word, but also other tools of the Microsoft Office suite. And I'm sorry, but my Zoom bar is hiding this, is the immersive reader. So the immersive reader is a feature that is available across all Microsoft 365 products, and that can help students with a number of reading related challenges, let's say. So the first feature is the possibility.
This featured report aims to explore the features and possible uses of certain digital tools
To use an artificial intelligence to have the text read aloud. You can see here on the right-hand side, I can switch between a male and a female voice, and I can also change the reading speed. Okay, so that can be very useful, for example, in second or foreign language learning. Can be a tool for students to practice their listening skills, their pronunciation skills, but also in any other course, it can be interesting for language-related skills. If students are reading on a screen, and we know that's not always ideal, they can activate line focus. So what this does is it's going to blacken out most of my screen and only place emphasis on the number of lines that I choose between 1 and 5. Okay, so this can be useful for students who have difficulty concentrating or want to avoid distractions. We can also change the color of the page depending on the environment where we're reading and studying. We can change the background color. Column width, very practical if you're on a portable device, for example. And the last one here is syllables. So you can also, and again, this can be useful in language learning, you can show the syllable breaks. So all of these features are available through the immersive reader, which is one tab in Microsoft Word, but as I said, also other Microsoft 365 products. I know I'm going quickly, as I warned you, but something I wish to point out is that in the attendee version that you can find on the Colloquium platform, you will see that each of these links is clickable, and it leads either to an article on Profweb that I'm using to share this information, or they lead, for example, to video tutorials. So the explanations I'm giving you right now, I've also recorded them as video tutorials. And if you click these links, you will be able to watch them back. So in PowerPoint, I just want to draw your attention to 3 features that are useful, again, to diversify the way in which we share information. So the first one can be found on the Insert tab, and we can insert audio that we record directly within PowerPoint, or that's pre-recorded and maybe saved as an MP3 or an MP4. this might be very useful if you like to share your PowerPoint presentations with your students on the learning management system afterwards. Well, instead of squeezing everything on the slide and jam-packing it with text, well, maybe some of the explanations we've given in class, we can also record them and insert them in our presentation so that when students are going to consult it online afterwards, they will have those explanations. So how does this work? Very simply, I press this red recording button. You see it has started recording. As soon as I press stop, a recording is automatically generated, represented by a speaker icon, and I can place this anywhere on my slide, and students will be able to play back whatever I've recorded. Same principle for screen recording. So maybe you are presenting content that is quite complex and you would like to draw your students' attention to certain elements that are found on the slide. Well, why not record the screen? So screen recording is automatically going to record the slide that you're at in your presentation. And so that way, whoops. That way, your students will be able to watch this explanation back afterwards. Just trying to get back to my presentation. It seems my PowerPoint has had a little bug. Okay. In PowerPoint, you can also record the entire slideshow. So if you're trying or planning to present a video tutorial, you can very straightforwardly also use your PowerPoint and use that very same screen recording function to narrate the entire PowerPoint and share it with your students afterwards in an MP4 format. Next up, we're starting to spice things up a little bit. So we are steering away from your typical text document, PowerPoint slides. And the example I want to use here is that of a course plan. Why a course plan? Because, well, for me, in my opinion, there is nothing as overwhelming for a student as a course plan, especially since this is most of the time the very first document we throw at them, we present to them during the very first class. We tend to give some explanations, and then it's up to the students to refer back to the course plan whenever they feel the need. And in my experience, when we give them a paper copy like that, well, they do not tend to refer to the course plan much afterwards. So one way we can help students make sense of the course plan, make it more accessible is, I'm just trying to get there, perfect, is to present an interactive course plan. And I've produced this interactive course plan using a platform called Genially. This is a template. So you don't need to have any advanced design skills to come up with this. This is basically a template where you can rename each of these tabs and then copy and paste the pertinent information. So instead of presenting one running document to my students, I've presented them with the content broken up into different sections. So for example, they're wondering, when do we have evaluations again? Well, they can click on this information and it will bring up the evaluations calendar from the course plan. right? If I wanted to take some more time, well, I could even, for example, when I have course objectives, I could prepare a little video where I verbally explain the course objectives. And so when students then click on this plus sign, that is the content they would be able to consult, right? So for now, because my practice is also a work in progress, it is still all very much text-based, but ultimately I would like to diversify here, and using Genially, that is absolutely possible. So I could insert images, videos, basically explanations in any format. So it is not only text-based. And of course, that will help students engage with the course plan, understand it better, because we give them different ways of interacting with it. So here at the bottom of this slide, you will find a link to Genially. Genially is a very extensive platform that allows you to easily create all sorts of visual content. I think I forgot to mention, but all of the tools that I'm presenting to you today are either free or what we call freemium, which is to say that they have an interesting amount of free features. And anything I'm showing to you today would qualify as a free feature. So I'm not presenting you tools or functions that require to be paid for. So I got a question in the chat. Does the CEGEP still require a traditional course plan to be submitted? Yes. At my CEGEP, CEGEP Limoilou, we still need to deposit a traditional course plan on Omnivox, and we need to send a copy into administration, which is why, as a first step, I've made this more interactive by copying and pasting different sections of my existing course plan in this more interactive template. But ultimately, I would like to further enhance this, but keeping in mind that at least in my teaching context, it is not considered an official document. All right, next up, screencasting. So I already explained screencasting in the context of PowerPoint. It can also be a very useful tool to discuss any information that you wish students to be able to consult after class or before class. So I'll give you a quick example here, and I will switch off the sound. Okay, that's already done. Great. So here what I've done, this are the instructions for a midterm project that I run in one of my courses. Instead of course, I go through these instructions as you all would in class with students. I ask students, do you have any questions? We take some time to get started on the project. Yet I noticed that often I received questions that I had explained before in class. So what I do now is, on top of the explanations given in class, I walk students through these instructions using video capture. So I use software such as Screencast-O-Matic or Loom or OBS Studio. And again, on the slide, there are different options that I've provided. And I explain the document, right? And so what you are seeing is I can highlight with my cursor certain pieces of information, and I can also pull up different documents that students will need. So I started with the instruction sheet itself. Now I've moved on to a PDF document that students will be able to use to complete this task. And so basically, I will be able to bring up all of the information that I would share usually in the classroom. And it seems like the video stopped buffering. I have no idea why. Let me just try and refresh. But I think you got the general idea. So for example, here I demonstrated how I wanted students to use phonetic transcription as part of a task. So I was able to open a Word document and then demonstrate it myself so students could see me type. And at the end, I also always take a moment to talk the students through the evaluation grid. So what you're seeing right here is the evaluation grid. Again, there's a huge amount of information in such a grid. It makes total sense to us as teachers. For students, it can be very overwhelming. So them being able to watch this back and having their teacher explain what the different indicators in the grid refer to and stand for can be really useful. So somebody asked, is there a limit of time for the video? So it will depend on the tool. The one I'm using right now is Screencast-O-Matic, and there is they offer a free account for educators, which has a very small number of limitations. OBS Studio is software that you will download, and it generates an MP4 that you would then need to share maybe on Moodle or Omnivox. It doesn't have any limitations either. Some other tools, for example, Camtasia, that you might have heard of before, will be limited to 5 minutes per video, for example. So here I would recommend to explore different platforms. They all have their strengths, their weaknesses. They all come with different limitations. So it will depend a bit on the usage that you make of these platforms, I would say. All right, so staying in the realm of presenting content visually, another tool I like to use is Powtoon. Powtoon allows us to, and again, this doesn't require a very high level of tech skills. It may look that way when you see the finished product, but believe me, this is super easy. So Powtoon is a website that allows you to create cartoon-like videos. I made such a video for my class guidelines. Why? Because this is something I always explain in the first class, and students are sort of rolling their eyes, not paying a lot of attention. And it helps to make this a little lighter, right? But this can also apply to any content that you wish to present and that is maybe very theoretical. And so you want to make it more digestible for your students. You want them to be more engaged. And so bringing in this visual content might help them with that. This can also be very interesting if you want your students to produce such video tutorials. Like you can maybe give them a topic to work on and ask that they produce one of these videos. And again, that will help motivate them as they get on with that task. So I'll just show you a very quick example of what this could look like. You will see I have a Powtoon for Edu license. And again, that gives you access to a number of free features.
Dear student, on behalf of your teacher, Andy, I would like to welcome you to your English class. Throughout the semester, Andy will accompany you on your road to success. To make this a pleasant and effective distance learning experience, your teacher asks that you familiarize yourself with the following guidelines. Throughout the course, please communicate in English with your classmates and Andy at all times.
So basically how this works is that you're going to select a number of characters and backgrounds, and these characters already have their own animation, right? You don't need to animate them. Each character that you see here does a certain action. You do not and cannot change that. You simply select which character you want and what you want the character to do. And then you build the sequence in the very same way that you would set up different PowerPoint slides, except that the content on each slide, well, moves, is animated, right? So what you see is a scene, and then I move on to what would be my next PowerPoint slide, in a sense. And on each slide, I simply put the visual elements that I wish to present. What we did at the very beginning of this workshop, bringing interactivity into a slideshow presentation, can also be an interesting way to present content more dynamically, to validate our students' comprehension of the content at the same time. So I ran it through the website, but these two tools, so WooClap and HyperSay, also allow you to integrate these questions right within your PowerPoint or your Google Slides. So you don't even need to exit your presentation. You just need to make sure that you're connected to the internet, and the results will be pulled right into your PowerPoint presentation. And so you simply insert this object on your PowerPoint slide, and then it functions in the exact same way as what you saw at the beginning of this workshop. Why not Nearpod? I have nothing against Nearpod, it's just I've never used it before. So of course there's a multitude of tools, and as I said, I've used a certain number in my, or at least explored a certain number as part of my own teaching practice. I do not claim to know and be familiar with every single tool. So by all means, if you know any other ones that that you use and that I haven't mentioned on my slides, please do as Dominique and share your own platforms that you use and which can be useful for other participants as well. So thank you for that suggestion. So I'll move on to the next format that we can use to present information. Graphic organizers. Graphic organizers including mind maps, concept maps. And again, I've given you 4 tools that are free, but I know there are plenty more. If you search mind map tool free, you will find dozens, because this is the kind of platform that that is quite popular. So when I say you can use mind maps to present content, well, here I'm presenting an example of one of my colleagues at Cégep Limoilou, who uses a concept map that he put together to guide students to different content in his class, right? So if the student is looking for verb inflection, well, they would simply click on verb tenses, simple present, they click on the arrow, and in this case, it leads to a YouTube tutorial that my colleague has selected and that he considers to be a good explanation. So instead of the student having to do a web search and ending up on an explanation that may or may not be of good quality, he or she is quickly guided to that information. Sometimes it can lead to a web page, right? So again, we can diversify the way in which we present the information. And by presenting the table of contents, so to speak, as a mind map, a concept map, it is going to allow students who are more visual, or who have maybe more difficulty pinpointing where exactly their needs lie, they will be able to find that information more easily. Of course, we can use mind maps for in a more traditional way as well. I'm just trying to find it. So this is, for example, a concept map that I co-constructed with my students in linguistics. And what we did was we went to the lab, and I started with the middle the middle button here, and then students, because you can see I can share this map with a code, and so students then worked in teams. I shared the code with each team, and they were able to add information to this one and the same mind map. So it can also become a tool for collaboration in that way. Moving into the realm of more visual tools, we can think of video presentations. So I'm sure we've all been faced with students who get really stressed, anxious when they need to speak in front of a group. Well, what we want to ask ourselves here is speaking in front of a group, is that one of the elements of the competency that we need to evaluate in our specific course, right? I'm talking for myself in an ESL context. Well, basically what I need to evaluate is if the student is able to express themselves precisely, clearly, is able to structure the content using field-specific vocabulary and things like that. Do I need to evaluate whether he or she is an excellent public speaker? No, I do not. So video presentations can take some of the stress out of having to present. One way in which you can do that is, I'll show you an example. It's not the one of which you see the screenshot. It's a different example. So what I did, and I got this idea because I had a student who struggled with performance anxiety. And so instead of getting my students to present in front of the class, I gave them the instructions, and then I sent them, this was of course when we were not using distance teaching, but it could work in any context. So I gave the explanations in class, and then I sent my students outside and asked them to film their presentations, which were in this case more spontaneous, using their cell phones. And so they were walking around, getting some fresh air, and delivering their presentations. And then they simply submitted them to me as video files. So if you're using more spontaneous presentations, obviously students cannot prepare them ahead of time because they don't know what is expected from them, or otherwise there are, of course, other ways in which you can ensure that the video was produced in a certain time limit, not ahead of time, etc., etc. But I find this to be a great way to especially help students who are a little nervous and anxious about speaking in front of a group. An idea that ties in with that is the idea of a video discussion forum. I've used text-based forums a great number of times, but I've always noticed that engagement is or tends to be an issue. Students just don't care for, reading everybody else's answer and then giving their own. And so Flipgrid is a video-based discussion forum. And I'll just show you an example. I've been using it quite heavily with the ESL groups I've been teaching this winter semester. So I started with, this was an icebreaker activity at the beginning of the semester. I started with a very simple question: what is your favorite word in English? And to explain that to me. To engage my students, I recorded myself answering that exact same question. So students, hi everyone, could watch me deliver my answer. That makes them more interested. As you can see, I'm just going to, as we start our course together, I don't seem to be able to turn off the sound, but anyway, I think you can see that automatic transcription is provided automatically in Flipgrid, so that's great for accessibility as well. And so, whoops, students can even activate immersive reader as they would in Microsoft Word. So instead of watching the person giving the presentation, they could be guided through the transcription of that. And so then each of my students delivers their answer, and you can see that they can also react to each other's presentations. They can they can answer, etc., etc. So what's neat is that you can see the number of hours of engagement. So that means the number of time that students have spent collectively recording and watching each other's presentations. Exactly. It's very easy to, Catherine says, it's so easy for teachers and students. It's very intuitive. It's quick and easy to set up as a teacher. And then for students, they just need a code that you share. They can use their computer, their cell phone, any device basically that allows recording sound and video. As you can see, when as a teacher you allow it, students don't need to share their image if they're not comfortable, so they could just audio record themselves. Or depending on what you teach, you could even ask students to film something they've doodled or written or done on paper in a different form. So it doesn't always need to be them filming themselves, right? And just to wrap up this section, infographics, interactive images, that is another way to present information more visually. So I've mentioned Genially before. ThingLink is another website that allows producing this kind of content. So you have a background, an image, and on that image, as a teacher, you can add content. So that can be sound, but can also be text, can also be an image, if it works. There we go. Here we have a little image slideshow. And this is also wonderful for students. They really get into this when they need to present content, an idea, presentation. They themselves could use this principle. So they use a background image, and then they can present their content in diverse formats. So in the chat, Catherine said, students don't want others to watch their video. I think there are different ways of dealing with that. We can give students the opportunity, and this was, of course, in reference to Flipgrid, right? So we can ask students to audio record themselves. We can ask students to film their surroundings while they're talking, or anything else. And of course, we can explain why we're doing this. We can demonstrate the security parameters so nobody's able to download the video. If you don't have the code and the password, you cannot access it. Of course, this is a platform to be used in education. So there are a number of security features that are built in. The tool, and Stephanie answered, thank you very much, is ThingLink. So don't forget, all of these links are clickable. So you just go back to the slide later on when you consult the attendee version on the Collecto platform. You'll be able to click ThingLink and it will take you right to the tool's website. So we're at the end of our first block, and here I just wanted to demonstrate again how ThingLink can be used in various ways. So if you go to bit.ly/UDL Crispech, or you scan this QR code with your phone, it will take you to a ThingLink image of this chart, where I give you the instructions again of what it is I'm going to be, what it is I'm asking you to do for the next 10 minutes or so. All right. Again, this is just for the purpose of demonstration. I will be moving forward, so if you haven't had time to go to this link, that is absolutely fine. So I'm just going to stop my screen share for a moment. And what I will be doing is I will be placing you into breakout rooms. Based on the chart, so the last image that you saw, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. So you'll be in groups of 4 or 5, simply to, well, share insight. Are there any tools of the ones that I presented that you've used before? And what was your experience with those tools? And then to try and determine where they would fit in the UDL chart. So what are the uses that you can see for these tools? How can they fit into an inclusive approach? And for that, I have prepared a collaborative document, and I'm sorry I forgot to explain this to you. So I will just show you. I've set up a collaborative whiteboard. I will post a link in each of your breakout rooms, and so it will look like this. And what you will be able to do is on the left-hand side, sorry, you will be able to click either text or sticky note. You can even choose the color. You can then go and place that sticky note somewhere in the chart and write your observations or a little discussion of your summary, or just the name of the tool, or any information you want to keep for later reference. And of course, these boards, once you have the link, you will be able to consult them later on. So we'll also leave a trace of what you and your team discussed. All right, so before I place you into breakout rooms, did anybody have any questions or comments that they wish to share before? At the same time, that's going to give me the time to make sure that everybody is in breakout room. We're good. All right, so I will be opening the rooms. Take a moment to introduce yourselves. I will be moving between the 3 breakout rooms just to copy and paste the web link that you will be using to access the Miro, the collaborative board. Okay, and then in 10 minutes time, I will bring you back to the main room. Time is going fast, but we will have a short second part where I will be presenting a few more tools for you to look into. So there we go.
Allô Catherine, ça va? Tu te reposes?
Je ne peux pas aller dans les breakout rooms. Je suis hôte.
Normalement, ah non, normalement tu peux.
Non, je pense que je suis l'hôte. Donc, je ne peux pas y aller.
Je pensais que tu pouvais quand même y aller.
Je crois pas.
Mets-moi haute, puis comme ça tu vas pouvoir joindre si tu veux.
Yes. Ouais. Ok. Et là, est-ce que je
peux
veux
aller où? Est-ce que tu veux... tu as une salle préférée? Bah, je vais te mettre dans la salle 3, il y a juste 2 personnes.
2 personnes, ouais. Ok, parfait. Merci.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous êtes là?
Oui.
Oui, est-ce que vous pouvez me changer de salle? Je vais faire un petit tour des différentes
Ah,
salles.
ok, oui. Est-ce que
J'étais dans
tu...
la 1, fait que n'importe laquelle autre. Là.
Parfait, je te mets dans la salle 2.
Merci. I just thought in 1 minute, so maybe it's not necessary.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit short. But
Just time to say hello and then bye-bye.
But Catherine is in room 3, so
All right.
at least she got the information there.
Right.
All
I liked
right.
your presentation. It was very structured. It was really good to take notes.
Great, I'm happy to hear it.
I like structures, yeah.
It's not always easy, especially when I find when presenting content online, because you don't really see the audience, the participants' reaction.
Yeah.
So, but I'm happy you say that. All right.
I know it's not the same, but I do tutoring, and I see like it needs to be structured for people to understand, and it's hard to structure a presentation or help or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite different, but still, you need structure.
Yeah, and it's a great experience. I find, you know, as a student, like it gives you those same skills for many other contexts, right?
Yes, I've done tutoring in 3 things, and it really helped me.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to get back to the right place in my PowerPoint.
It was math, French, and methodology.
Yeah,
I don't know that word in English.
Methodology.
I would need your class in linguistics.
All right, so I think everybody's making their way back to the main room. And so I am just going to share an example. So you have this in your attendee version of the PowerPoint. Again, this is just, you know, some of the uses that I see for these tools. So we won't necessarily have time today to go over why did we place each tool in each box, and I'm sure you would like to give that some further thought. You know, maybe once you've explored some of these tools in some more depth. But what was important for me was to let you experience this principle of questioning yourselves on, well, this tool looks cool or interesting, but how can it help me have a more inclusive teaching practice, right? Because in the end, that is our goal. That is what we're trying to achieve. And sure, many tools can go in many different boxes depending on our objectives, whereas others might be more limited to the purpose we can use them for. But just being aware of, you know, why am I using this tool? Why am I selecting it? What am I trying to do with it? Well, that is going to be helpful and is going to guide you in your usage of that tool. So time is going extremely fast today. But I just want to point out a few tools for feedback. So we won't have time for a second sort of brainstorming session if we want to respect the time, but you have access to these Miro collaborative boards. So I invite you to use them, maybe add some more of these tools, or just go through this individually at some point. So I told you why I think feedback is so important earlier on. So I'll focus on a couple of ways to give feedback. We often give written feedback, and I don't know how about you, but when I give feedback the first time versus student 20, well, I tend to be a little bit more concise for student 20. And that is, of course, not ideal, far from. So one way of overcoming this is and this works in Microsoft Word and in Google Docs. The procedure is somewhat different. But again, you find it described on Profweb and the article is linked. So from any Word document, you're going to go to Options and then to Proofing. And in the autocorrect options, you can set replacement codes. And you have a number of these for typical typos and symbols, but you can create your own. And so what you can see here is that I've created one that is comma PU. Why did I start with a comma? Because normally you would never have a comma followed directly by text, right? You would always put a space. So you want to make sure that you don't choose a sequence of letters that would be possible in normal text, because remember, Word is automatically going to replace this code. So here I've determined that this PU code says review your punctuation. So what can I do? I'm going to insert a comment. I type comma PU, and as soon as I hit space, it replaces this code with my complete comment. And of course, this is a very generic and short one, but if you are working on something very specific, well, you could come up with comments that are as detailed as, I don't know, 10, 20 sentences, but that you feel you need to repeat often from one student to another. So instead of copying and pasting or retyping information, using these keyboard shortcuts is going to allow students to get more personal feedback, because you're making the process a little less repetitive. So for more information, you can click right here on this link. Audio feedback. I think in a remote teaching context, maybe more and more people are experimenting with this. Is as straightforward as it sounds. You use a tool to record your verbal comments instead of typing them out. You can go the simple way. The simplest way would be Vocaroo. Vocaroo is, as you see, a very simplistic website. It has one function and it fulfills it very well. You press this one button that is there to start recording your voice. So you can give your observations, your feedback. You could even walk your students through the text they've handed in and so on. When you're finished, the platform will automatically generate a code, a URL, a web link. You copy and paste that in Omnivox, Mio, anywhere you communicate with your students, and they just need to click that link and listen to your audio feedback. So it's not necessarily shorter than giving written feedback, but it allows you to present the feedback differently, which I think can be useful not only for the students, but also for us teachers to not always be typing comments. Of course, you can also use audio recording software like Audacity, Talk and Comment. Again, based on your level of ease with technology, you might be looking at different options to determine which is the most effective for you in your teaching context. Another way of providing feedback can be integrating questions or elements of interaction within video tutorials. So either if you're using a material that is already available on YouTube, or you've recorded yourself. Remember, we talked about screencasting at the very beginning. Then you can use some of these platforms. So we have Edpuzzle and H5P are the best known ones to insert questions. So let me just show you what that looks like. Yes, 1 minute. I will select one more tool and then I shall wrap up. So here I have a video I pulled from YouTube, publicly available. And so right from the beginning, I've inserted a comment. So before students start watching, I give them some guidance as to how they might want to watch this video. So I've just switched off the sound. So then they watch the video. And basically wherever you see a dot here on the timeline, I've placed a question. When the video gets to that point, it will automatically pause and it will present a question to the students. There we go. Now the students cannot continue watching the video until they've answered this question correctly. So good answer is the Anglo-Saxons. It's the correct answer. I can now continue watching the video. So this is great for students to monitor themselves. Have I understood this correctly? And it also allows you to make sure that you keep their attention, right? Because so often, especially if the video is a little bit longer, then you lose students along the way. So it keeps them cognitively engaged as well. Right underneath here, just to point this out to you, I've also included an interactive quiz. And so both of these are things I've done with H5P. So if you're interested in that, click on H5P. Edpuzzle allows you to do the same thing, but only for interactive videos. I want to present one last tool to you, just to throw it out there, because it is one of my favorite revision tools. It's called Factile, and Factile allows you to create a Jeopardy style revision quiz. So if I just unfortunately we don't have time to play it. I usually like to play it with you, but let me just find it. I have too many. Sorry about this. I have too many windows open. Here we go. So I will just demonstrate it to you. So basically, I've planned a board with questions. And then I can display this to my students, and their cell phones are turned into buzzers. So principle is similar to WooClap. They join with a code. You can put them into teams, and one of them connects, and their phone becomes a big red button and it becomes their buzzer. And so, for example, I could then, this is not the game interface, this is the editor interface. I could then ask a question like, true or false, UDL always requires the use of technological tools. Of course, we know that is not true. We don't always need technology. So this is a question for 100 exclamation marks, right? So this brings in an element of gamification. And again, that's going to allow the students to engage with the content in a different way. It's going to help them with their retrieval process because of the challenge that is introduced. So again, that is going to make this more inclusive than a typical quiz where everybody gets a multiple choice quiz on a piece of paper, for example. So as I feared, I did not have time to cover all of the tools, but they are available, as I've said a couple of times, in the PowerPoint that is on the conference platform. But here on this last slide, I've also included the link to the complete report on Profweb. So many of the things I've said are in that report in more detail. So I do recommend that you check it out at some point. You can always contact me. My email is andy.vandrom@collecto.ca, and it will be a real pleasure if you have any questions about any of these tools, either individually, so if you're just looking for a quick answer by email, or as I mentioned at the very beginning of the workshop, if you're looking maybe to focus on one or two or a couple of these tools and you say, well, you know, we'd like you to organize a workshop just focused on these things and bring it to our college, either in person at one point or virtually, then that is absolutely part of our mission at Profweb, at Collecto. And so it will be my pleasure to do that and to work with you. So thank you very much for being there, and thank you for sticking around for these extra 7 minutes as well.
Thank you, Andy, and it was a great presentation. I think the attendees appreciate to manipulate the thing, but I think we have maybe question. If you want to go to the lobby or stay here, if you have enough time to answer to the question.
Sure, I can answer any questions right here. I'm not in a rush, but if you are, and if you have some questions for me later, you can also send them to me by email. I know that the email address is also on the workshop page, but I'll just put it here in the chat as well, just in case. Yeah. So please do not hesitate to reach out to me in any way.
But I think in our breakout room, Yoon had a question for you, I think so.
First of all, thank you so much, Andy. I learned a lot today. It was a very, very resourceful, I should say. I have just one quick question. I was always interested in mind mapping or concept mapping software or app. Is there one that particular that you would recommend that is also, I say, free of cost and you know, widely accessible to teachers and the students?
Mm-hmm. Well, the ones that I showed you earlier, so the one that acted as a table of contents as well as the other one, they were both made in MindMeister, right? So the link is on the slide. I find that that one is especially more appealing visually. CMap tools, I would say, is like the classic. It's one of the first software programs for mind mapping, and that is still widely used, but it's not as visually attractive, I would say. The one thing you want to keep in mind is that MindMeister in its free version, I believe, is restricted to 3 different mind maps. So that means that there are always ways around this. You either make sure you only have 3 at the same time, or what I do when I want to create different teams with different groups of students, while I use my Outlook address, my Gmail address, and so on. And so I have different accounts, and they're all free accounts.
Thank you.
With Profweb, we don't have access to a mind map feature or tools.
Well, so at Profweb, we don't necessarily provide software tools, right?
Yes, but I don't know where I see that. But I think for the CEGEP teacher, there is a tool.
We provide, and that is actually something I haven't said, but we provide web spaces.
Oui.
That is something you will find on our website as well. If you're looking to host a wiki or a WordPress blog or website, then we offer free web space for that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it wasn't a mind map. So thank you very much. If you have, do you have any question for Andy? It was a great presentation.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, again, for being there. And as I said, please do not hesitate whether you have a question today, next week, next fall. Please do reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Alors là, comment il faut que je fasse? Je m'en vais comment? Merci beaucoup, Andy. C'était vraiment très bien. Moi, je connaissais beaucoup de choses, mais j'ai appris plein de choses, puis j'ai fait des liens. Et j'ai adoré le Miro, en fait. Mm-hmm. Parce que quand on est prof, on ne voit pas comment les étudiants peuvent travailler comme ça.
Oui. Effectivement. Puis c'est ça, j'aurais aimé l'utiliser 2 fois, mais le temps passe toujours plus vite.
Ouais, tu avais beaucoup de choses. Hein,
exactement.
C'est sûr. Puis mais, les gens étaient vraiment très contents.
Puis c'est ça un peu le but aussi de cet atelier, c'est de présenter un peu qu'est-ce qui est possible, comment s'y retrouver, puis ensuite, bien, s'il y a des besoins plus précis. Parce que là, c'est sûr que une enseignante en chimie, elle n'aura pas les mêmes besoins que quelqu'un en langue seconde. Donc, c'est pour ça que je préfère présenter plus un éventail.
Merci beaucoup.
Est-ce que tu as besoin que j'arrête l'enregistrement ou tu peux
Oui, je pense que tu peux enlever tu peux mettre ton micro à off pour pas dans Zoom, dans Streamer, je pense. Moi, je ne sais pas ce que je dois faire dans Streamer. Je vais le laisser allumé et l'enregistrement, je ne suis plus hôte, je crois, parce que Pauline... Ah, mais je suis co-host, donc... Parce que Pauline, je voulais aller dans les breakout rooms. Donc, je vais arrêter l'enregistrement, je pense. Et puis, do you want to stop cloud? Yes.